Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar being presented by ESS BIZTOOLS, where we're going to explore the new Export Market Development Grant that has been announced by the Australian Government and is being administered by Austrade. My name is Peter Towers, I'm the Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome. There's been a change from the traditional system that the Australian Government has offered Export Market Development Grant for the last 20 odd years. This now is a grant application program similar to most other Australian Government grants. It's been changed from the reimbursement model. So the reimbursement model finished at the 30th of June 2021, but if you had clients who had prepared business activities for export marketing in the financial year 2020-21, then those returns have to be lodged by the 30th of November 2021. The new system is going to provide greater certainty for exporters. The grant agreements will be over 2 or 3 years. We've got a whole new system. We've got this concept of tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is for 2 years, and tiers 2 and 3 actually apply for 3 years each. And there's assistance for first-time exporters. The support is 50% of eligible expenditure up to the annual limits, and there's been some changes made in the eligible expenditure that can be incurred. So it's an entitlement-based grant. There's no comparison being made between the various businesses applying for grants as to who's better or who's slightly inferior to another one. If you meet the guidelines, you will be eligible. Grants are paid by Austrade in accordance with the negotiated grant agreement. So after the 30th of November, when these applications close, Austrade will decide who to accept, and then they will enter into grants agreements with each of those businesses. Just bear in mind that any type of business can apply for an export market development grant. Unlike a lot of other government programs, it's not limited to big business. One of the other big changes has been, though, that the turnover limit is $20 million. In the current scheme, it is $50 million. And the grants, as I've said, are available in 3 tiers. Tier 1 is for SME businesses who are ready to export in the grant year. The grant year is 2021/22. Grants are up to $40,000 per financial year for 2 years. So tier 2 is for eligible exporters who are exporting eligible products, who are seeking to expand their export promotion activity for eligible products. And the grants are up to $80,000 per financial year for up to 3 years. And in the grant applications, if your client's a tier 2 business, they're basically submitting their plan for the next 3 years so that that can be approved now by Austrade. Tier 3 is for eligible exporters who are exporting eligible products and who are seeking to expand their export promotion activity. And they wish to make a strategic shift in the marketing of eligible products in a foreign country. Now, that doesn't mean they have to go to another country. One of the examples given by Austrade is that someone who has established themselves as an exporter from Australia on the west coast of the USA may now be wanting to also establish themselves on the east coast of the USA, and that comparison would apply to many other countries, such as Canada and other countries around the world. So the grants are up to $150,000 per financial year for a 3-year period. So $450,000 could be earned. So in total, over an 8-year period, $770,000 could be approved for an individual exporter. That means that they're undertaking work costing $1,540,000 because the grant is 50%. So for the tier 1 applicants who are new to export, if you've got those clients, they must be ready to export. This is not something that they're dreaming about doing in the next 2 to 3 years at this stage. They're new to export and they're considered ready for export if they've not previously exported eligible products, but now they're ready. And they've got appropriate skills in marketing eligible products in a foreign country. Now, this is a new regulation that's been included. They must be able to demonstrate that by either a declaration by the applicant that they have used Austrade's export readiness tool, and we refer to that tool a little later in this webinar overview. Or if the applicant has completed an export readiness training with a representative body or some other sort of trainer in exporting activities. Austrade doesn't list who those organizations might be. It's up to your client to decide who can best give them those services. But it needs to be someone who has expertise in exporting. The export readiness tool that I just referred to is primarily targeted at tier 1 applicants. There's some due diligence questions. What type of industry you're in? Do you have a clear and compelling selling proposition? Is your product or service selling well in the Australian market? Austrade's view, as is very obvious when you go through their material on this grant, is that a business needs to have established themselves in the Australian market, not just going off to start exporting from day one. If you have got a client that fits that category, they'd better have a good reason why they're not established in the Australian market before they're going to go to exporting. Do they have the capacity and resources to scale up their operations to meet increased demand? Because presumably that's what they're hoping is going to happen. Do they have the resources to modify the products or services to suit overseas customers' standards and their requirements and potentially the importing countries' government requirements of particular products? Do you have the cash flow to manage longer payment terms from overseas buyers? These are the key questions that are considered in this readiness tool, which then has various other questions that occur once you answer those basic questions. Do you know the laws and regulations to get your product or service into an overseas market? This is very important because there's 200 countries in the world and everyone's got their own parliament. And you know what's happening in Australia with our states. We've got state to state differences. This also happens overseas. Can someone in your business take time to build the exporting side of your business? I was a company secretary, chief financial officer of a listed public company that 70 to 80% of our income was coming from exporting. I can assure you there's a lot of time and effort got to be given by senior management to the exporting activities of a business. And is your company willing to dedicate the staff, the time and the resources to exporting in the long term? And Austrade's saying that's at least 3 to 5 years. So this is not just a sudden thought. Let's go and start becoming an exporter. It needs a commitment. And this is very clear if you go through the export readiness due diligence questions, which I would suggest as the key accounting advisor to your clients that you should go through and look at this so you appreciate what they've got to do. And most of this is new under the amendments that have been made. Do you have the people in your network you can contact for advice and support? It's very hard to get information out of some of the overseas markets. You might be only getting one side of the story from whoever you're dealing with. It's great if you can get it from other people. Now, some of those resources could be Austrade. Austrade has about 80 offices around the world that you can contact them. And in fact, your clients should be talking to those offices to get their feedback on their local knowledge. And does the business have a website or professional online presence that has been designed so as to attract international customers? There's a lot of things there, isn't there? And then we get to starting your export strategy. And again, this is for tier 1 applicants. Austrade seem to be very keen in these amendments to try to help businesses to get themselves into the right frame of mind, the right attitude if they're going to export. So the aim is to create a solid, well-structured export strategy tailored to your business. And we have an export strategy template. So the export strategy template starts off with the comment that I agree 100% with, and that is that every business that's contemplating export activities should already have a business plan. And the export plan is being added to the business plan. So the business plan will currently relate to Australian activities and perhaps research and development and marketing promotion. But in your export strategy or your client's export strategy, is your business ready and capable of tackling more complex markets offshore? And a lot of these markets are complex. They can be very difficult. They can be very time demanding, and they can be very tiring, because if you're getting phone calls relating to international business, a significant percentage of them are going to be coming in what is considered to be sleeping hours in Australia. So you need to have planned and thought about that you may be getting phone calls from Europe or USA at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., because that's when they're working. So you need to do your research. Your client does. They need to have the structures right. They need to have marketing strategy, and they need to have some finances, because the payment arrangements that an overseas customer insists on might be completely different to trying to get 30-day payment terms in Australia. So who are you preparing this plan for? Complete the template by answering the questions that are relevant to your business. So that initial question, who are you preparing this plan for? That's asked on the form. So you'd have the client's name. Get professional help if you're not confident. There are export experts around Australia. There are forwarding agents. There are customs agents. There are people who have a lot of knowledge on exporting. There are some people who've worked for major exporters that might be available as consultants to assist in a clear understanding of what's involved. And Austrade suggests that when you're preparing any of this information, you show your actual figures versus your budget figures, wherever that's appropriate. But if you're a new exporter, you won't have any budget figures as to what's already been achieved. There's a summary in the document, and they're suggesting that you write that last, and that's how you should do it in a business plan. The page that they're suggesting last is the summary. Export capability, relevant experience, the products or services. What is your client's unique selling proposition? The products and services. Risk management. What are the potential risks for the business? Austrade has identified the top 8 risks to avoid when exporting, and we've got these summarized for you. The export documentation. I can well remember my baptism of fire in getting introduced to the concept that I was responsible for export documentation. That hadn't been explained to me, and I wasn't given a detailed list of what my responsibilities were, unfortunately, or if I was, someone conveniently missed off export documentation. It's a world unto itself. Now, a lot of things have changed since then, but we need to make sure that your client fully understands what's involved. The HS code, which is the harmonized system, is a system used to classify goods for international trade. Your client needs to be familiar with this, because otherwise they're going to have trouble on their export documents. You only need to have a word spelt the wrong way, or the wrong numbers, or the incorrect number of copies of a document to have a shipment pushed aside and will not be allowed to be imported into a country. This is very serious, and your clients need to realize that. There's also these international commercial terms that are the global accepted rules for exporting and importing products, which your client needs to be familiar with. And they need to have an awareness of the laws and regulations of their target market, because that's where they're going. They need to protect their intellectual property. We're going through these suggestions Austrade's made for risk management. A lot of businesses seem to forget all about protecting their intellectual property. Now, what is it? It's their business and brand name, the logo, the products and processes, the trademark, research and development activities that have not yet been patented. You want to make sure you're not disclosing anything overseas. And be careful on making representations in a country that your patent is not yet registered in. In fact, my suggestion would be, if your client's got a patent that's in process of being registered for a particular country or a group of countries, don't go selling products into that market until that's registered in that country. Otherwise, you could have real problems. Unscrupulous or unsuitable new business partners. Well, you can get that by doing a deal with someone one suburb across in Australia, can't you? So you can imagine some of the potential problems that people encounter around the world. Not understanding local culture. Local culture varies from all sorts of things. The color of cartons, the color of the writing on cartons, the way people dress, the way you talk to people. So that research needs to be undertaken first, so you've got a clear understanding of those points of difference. And there are points of difference all around the world. Be aware of the hidden costs. Now, we've included some of them here, or Austrade has. Travel costs, specialist advice from lawyers, intellectual property experts, customs brokers. Changes to your labeling or product or packaging to meet local market regulations or preferences. I was in the meat industry in my public company experience, and the meat industry found out quite forcibly, is probably the best way of saying it, as they started to export to new markets, that the color of cartons was very important. The way things were written, the level in an organization that executives spoke to, was all part of the costs and the culture of dealing with overseas markets. Long and complex payment terms. Some of these international customers are not going to pay in 30 days. What is the payment terms? How is your client going to finance that period? And then the real problem of not getting paid. And that can happen. unfortunately. I've got vivid memories of some of those issues that can occur no matter how well you've planned your system. Political and global risks, they're everywhere. It's a real minefield. Some of the problems we've had through COVID-19. Businesses then need to identify their SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In particular, what are your clients identifying as their weaknesses and threats? What can be done to improve that position? Because that could be a real problem. What's the market? It needs to be analysed. How easy is it to access? What's the documentation that's got to be submitted? How are you going to assemble that? Is some of the questions you could be putting to your client. Your clients should have an idea of who they're competing with. Is there a major organisation in the country they're exporting to that supplies the same product? What are they selling it at? What's their arrangements in that country? Are they closely intermingled with industry or government? What's their unique selling proposition? What's the export pricing strategy that's going to allow you to compete with the businesses that are already there or other exporters? What's the client's channel strategy? Who are the key customers they're targeting? How are they going to organize the sales and distribution channels? What's their advertising and market promotion plan? This all needs to be thought through. The management and implementation plan, experience, training and support, what they've done with suppliers, warranties and refunds. Has all this been thought out? Because this is what Austrade's going to be potentially coming back and asking questions about. If they get a feeling that your client has not properly prepared themselves for this exporting journey. So it needs to be thought through first. The finances we've talked about. So let's now go through and look at some of the key matters within the export grants application form. Just a reminder, this has to be lodged by the 30th of November 2021. I hear on the Austrade grapevine, there's no chance of extensions being given. This is the application date, and they're expecting a lot more applications to come in over the final 2 weeks. So we've summarised here the key information that they're looking for. Who's the applicant? Contact details, the type of entity. If you're a company, the ACN number will be automatically recorded. Business or trading names. When did you commence? This is all fairly standard information. How many employees did you have? Well, the client had at the 30th of June 21. You don't have to answer that, but I think it's always a good idea to answer these questions. You might find that you're not given a high rating if you don't answer. What was your total business income in 2021, the clients? And bear in mind that the turnover limit is $20 million in 2021. There's some questions there relating to insolvency administration. And there's questions relating to disqualifying convictions by a director or business owner. So if you as accountants have someone who you know did have some problems with Austrade in the past, please make sure you've talked to them about that and that they understand the sort of questions they're going to get asked if they wish to proceed. If the applicants are part of a group, those details have got to be disclosed. And they want to know whether the company or anyone associated with the company or the business, the partnership, the sole trader has ever applied for an export market development grant in the past and whether they received one. So all that information's got to go to them. And if any of the people involved in this application have been involved in an export market development grant application in some other entity, that also needs to be disclosed. And what they're going to be doing is checking back to make sure that that was all transacted in a fit and proper manner. And if it wasn't, your client could have some problems in getting approved for this year's export market development grant. They're asking questions about Indigenous organizations, and Indigenous organization is where 51% of it, the company or business or partnership, is owned by Indigenous people. There are definitions on the eligible products, which are divided into goods, tourism services, other services, events, intellectual property and know-how, and software. The tourism services is basically, we're an Australian-based organisation that offers accommodation to international tourists, offers tours, offers activities, is promoting their business to an overseas audience. They're eligible to claim the export market development grant. You've got to be able to provide, or your client's got to be able to provide, a comprehensive description of the products that you intend to market. Representative bodies can apply for this grant also, but my comments today are primarily relating to businesses that are applying. And unfortunately, New Zealand's not included in the concept of export market development grants from Australia. Australian government treats New Zealand as literally being part of Australia. And you cannot receive any export market development grant relating to any activity at all with New Zealand. And with goods, there's questions about, are the goods made in Australia? And you can answer details about your standard commodity in the drop-down box. And there's some questions then about the tourism services that I've probably just referred to before. And then we got other services. And again, it's for anyone other than New Zealand. And then the inputs become very important. Does the service consist of only 100% Australian inputs? Makes it fairly clear. But in others, it could be different percentages. And if you're promoting an event and wanting to claim export market development grants, it must be held in Australia or online, hosted by an Australian person. So don't forget that if your client's talking to you and they do run events, that if the events are targeted at overseas people to attend, therefore spend money in Australia, they can include those details. There's some questions then on the intellectual property. Does it relate to a trademark? Was the trademark first used in Australia? Or has it increased in significance or value because of being used in Australia? And basically, you need to be able to establish that. But if it's not a trademark, is it the result of work, wholly research work done in Australia, or substantially of research work done here? So Australia trying to establish that these products or services are Australian made and developed. Similar questions for software. Now, the eligible expenses are interesting. The grants, as I said earlier, can be up to $770,000 over the 3 stages, the 3 tiers, over an 8-year period. Now, this includes any export market development grants that have already been paid to this entity. So they may already be in tier 2 and they've received export market development grant in the last couple of years. Well, that's part of the $770,000. So the applicant obviously selects which tier they're applying for. You don't have to start at tier 1. You could go straight to tier 2. If you are already exporting, you might not have, or your client might not have lodged a export market development grant previously for various reasons. So in the tier 1 agreement, the key question is, have you ever exported? Because it's only available for applicants who have never exported, or if they have exported but have received a single grant. Otherwise, you are asked to move to tier 2. If you've answered yes, you've previously exported, you've received a single grant under the Act. There's some further questions to be answered. So you can see there's a range of questions. Have you used Austrade's export readiness tool, which is what I referred to earlier? Or have you completed the export readiness training provided by government or other representative bodies? Now, if you answer no to these questions, or your client does, they're not eligible to enter into a grant agreement unless these requirements are met. So your client should be, at this stage of the game, there's only 2 weeks to go before this application for this year closes. Not really long enough, I wouldn't have thought, to enroll with a course being conducted by someone. They need to get on the internet and read the export readiness tool and register for it and follow it through so that there is a record. And then diarize the day they went on and how long they spent on that process. So you've got that information, or your client's got that information if they're asked questions about it by Austrade. The tier 2 agreements, have you ever exported? If you answer no, you're not eligible for this tier and they need to go back to tier 1. And then the dates come into play. If they're applying for tier 2, they answer yes. If it was earlier than June 2020, they may not be eligible for tier 2 because Austrade may reach the opinion they're not currently exporting. So your client needs to think this through and take all these points into consideration with how they're drafting the application form. So if the last time your client exported was after July 2020, presumably they're wanting to expand their export promotion activities. And that's the question. But if they answered no, they're not eligible for tier 2, as they're not seeking to expand their export promotion activities. And if you answer yes, you'll be asked to attach evidence of your most recent export sale. So undoubtedly what a lot of this is about is Austrade are saying, we want to have the funds there for, first of all, new exporters, brand new, to get them started. And then if you've already exported, to try to help you to expand your export promotion. And if you're not expanding your export promotion as a business, they're not going to be able to help you. The status quo is not good enough. They're wanting you to be, your client to be doing other things. And if you've answered July 2020, they also want to know what markets you're exporting to. Now, the Tier 3 agreements, again, you tell them the month and year you most recently exported. If it was earlier than June 2020, I suspect your client's got a problem in getting admitted to Tier 2. If it was after July 2020, you need to be able to say you're seeking to expand your export promotion activity for eligible goods. So if you answer no to those questions, you're not eligible for Tier 3, as you're not seeking to expand your export promotion activity. And if you answer yes, your client's got to supply evidence of their most recent export sales. So the real question is, are you making a strategic shift in the marketing of eligible products? And again, obviously, I'm saying you, but it's the client's got to answer these questions. If you answer that no, you're not eligible. Go back to Tier 2 and see if you can fit in there. If you answered yes, you need to provide details on your plan to market eligible products. So they want more information. So the plan to market eligible products can be completed using the following questions, or you can draft another document that addresses these questions, which could be your business's internal planning document. So what they want to know for Tier 1 applicants is the name of the applicant, which indices are you going to use to measure success, your overall budget for each financial year. It's 2 financial years for Tier 1. What marketing activities are you proposing to undertake? If your client's a Tier 2 applicant, you've got to supply a detailed description of the eligible goods you're planning to market. What business goals are you seeking to address through your marketing? And some further questions there. And Tier 3, detailed description of the eligible goods you are planning to market. So there's some questions there to be answered. Now, a lot of this is all brand new. This has not been previously asked. And are you planning to make a strategic shift in your marketing? It could be targeting a new market, such as a new country for existing products or services. It could also include a different market in a large country, such as the United States of America, where you could plan to market on the East Coast versus the West Coast. But it could also mean a different market segment. That's the type of customers or the demographics for your products or services. So that needs to be thought through. And you need to provide an explanation and to set out in detail what strategic shift you'll be undertaking and how you'll achieve this goal. Which markets are you exporting to? Are questions your client has to answer. We're not going to look at the representative bodies. So now we've got some of the summary and what the expenses are. Maintaining a representative in a foreign country, that must be for more than 6 months. Short trips to a foreign country, maximum of 21 days. Agents being engaged, short trips within Australia, maximum 21 days. Foreign buyer visits to Australia to look at the products and services, maximum 21 days. Soliciting for business in foreign countries, attending trade fairs, free samples that you've sent to someone overseas, promotional literature and advertising material, intellectual property rights that you can acquire obviously by payment, and training if you're paying for training in certain markets. You're not able to claim expenses that are capital expenses relating to trade with New Zealand. So you can't claim any of those items. So what you're determining is your planned export marketing spend per financial year. So it's a fair bit of information there that's required. And applicants need to be able to substantiate the cost when required. Now, the way this system will work, you supply the Austrade with your original application, which has to be lodged by the 30th of November. And then I presume that next year, you're going to be asked to submit a return showing what you've already spent and have all the documentation available, your client is, so that if an audit's conducted, they can produce the substantiation. There's some documentation requirements required in the grant application, detailing things like conflicts of interest. Describe the conflict of interest. And then you've got to include supporting documentation on the application. If you're operating as a trust, Austrade want to see the trust deed. They require the profit and loss statement for the applicant for 2020-21 in the balance sheet as at the 30th of June, 2021. They want to see your plan to market. They need answers on the goods made outside Australia, why they should be eligible for an export market development grant, and there's some details relating to that in the documentation. And they want to see the most recent export sales of an eligible product, proof of that for a tier 3 applicants. They also need your client's bank details and declarations by an authorized person, which basically is confirming that everything's the truth. And there's huge penalties if you tell an untruth. So that's the summary of the Export Market Development Grant. It's significantly different to the original scheme that we had in operation for the last 20 years or so. This one is an application in advance. Austrade are going to go through these applications after the 30th of November. They are then going to decide on what contracts to offer a whole range of businesses, and then to enter into contract agreements with them. They have also indicated they will be making progress payment based on the information that's been submitted in the application form. And obviously then your client will have to submit information at the end of the financial year, which supplies the supporting evidence as to where the money has been spent. This is an interesting development on this program. I think once it settles down properly, it will work a lot better. than the previous system, where it was a bit of a gamble. Your client had to go out and spend the money and then submit an application trying to get a 50% reimbursement of that money. And in some cases, Austrade disagreed and the client never got anything. This way, as long as the client spends the money in accordance with the submission that's been made to Austrade, there should be no disputes. But there are always disputes when it comes to applications going to government departments. So as an accountant or an advisor helping your client, it's very important that the application is as accurate as possible and is clearly defined as to what the expenditure is going to be for. And if you or your client think it's a grey area, expand the answer, give the details to Austrade so that if they've approved it, it's in accordance with what you've submitted and they've been given full information. Otherwise, your client could be very disappointed. I hope this overview of how this new export market development grant system operates is of assistance to you. The material that we've utilized within these PowerPoint slides is part of the ESS BIZTOOLS system on export market development grant to assist in guiding you through this process. There are other forms that are attached that will also help in a better explanation of various components. If you have any questions on any aspect of this new grant, you could send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. Just a reminder for any of your clients who wish to claim export market development grant in respect of the financial year 2020/21, that application also has to be lodged by the 30th of November 2021. So if your clients haven't got through to you yet, if you're involved in the application to Austrade, there's a fair bit of work to be done. If not, maybe a reminder going to your clients that they need to submit their grant application also for 20/21, as well as the new form for 21/22. If you would like to have a look at any further information on ESS BIZTOOLS, please go to our new website, www.essbiztools.com.au. Stay safe and have a great day. Goodbye. And I hope you have a full appreciation of how this new upgraded export market development grant is going to work for the benefit of your clients involved in exporting products or services from Australia. Thank you. Have a great day. Goodbye.